Hello, to Mindfulness Collective. This right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream, coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. And if you're joining us anywhere other than twitch.tv/deepmindfulness, well, you're just in the wrong place. Folks, very excited to see you here all as people begin to trickle in. As you may already know, we have a very special guest with us today, which I'm very excited about. Aishin Leonard, who is a fellow teacher and someone who I have known for a number of years now, and I'm very excited that she's going to be joining us here. But before we bring Aishin in, I wanted to ask our question, our ever-burning question: where on earth are you? Where is the Carmen Sandiego that is you today? Where do we find you from? If folks, Vancouver, Carl from Vancouver, welcome. Rory from Kingston says, well, hello, welcome, Aishin. 613 style, welcome. It's nice to see you here. I don't know if we've met before, so nice to see you. Northern California. Great. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Tomalin joining from India. Welcome. Awesome, folks. So pretty excited about today. Keep them coming. Let me know where folks are coming from here. Jean from Brooklyn. Lovely to see you, as always. So I'm very excited to have Aishin here with us. We're going to be diving into a little bit of her meditation background and her story, and we're going to have the luxury of being guided by Aishin, which I'm very excited about. Hello.
Hello. How are
Aishin.
you?
I'm good. Where are you coming from? That's my first big question.
Right now, I'm actually in the Central Valley of California. I'm in Fresno.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And how is it there? Is it highly locked down, or is it chill, or how are you doing?
It's very anti-lockdown in this area of California, which is interesting because in the Bay Area, it's very, yeah,
An
different.
anti-lockdown meaning like
Yeah.
protest level lockdown, where they're like,
Not so much protest. It's just people kind of respect people for doing whatever that is that they're doing. Some stores have mandatory signs, but most people, if the store doesn't have the sign, they're going to just show up without a mask, or they're just going to be, yeah.
yeah,
So it's nice to not have that level of like constant hypervigilance going around that you can feel from people. And as somebody who has autoimmune problems and stuff, it also feels very dangerous.
yeah, that's a bummer. And I think that's one of the things that we can talk more about this, but people have a very hard time considering outside of their own experience. It's just not part of their wiring. And they get into the politics and they get into their opinion and, fight, I got to fight for my right to be mask free or whatever the belief system is. And then there's the aspect that, it's people's lives, it's people's health and people's safety. So, yeah. Okay. That's a little bit, that is what it is. Okay. So, let's see here. Okay, I'm just making an adjustment. Okay, great. So, folks, today, do you want to give a little bit of a background on what the meditation is we're going to do? And then I figured we would wait for kind of the more structural elements to talk about what we're going to sort of be diving into content-wise. Or maybe you want to talk about that too.
Yeah. Well, for the meditation, I'm thinking of giving a guided trauma-informed practice to really kind of just release any kind of place where the body might be holding on to any kind of excess tension or energy from the trauma. So that being said, I want to really emphasize that guidance for trauma should be an internal honoring of your system. So if I give a guidance where somebody out here is feeling like that is too much of something, to really honor that feeling of too much and to adjust your practice however you need to. It could be opening your eyes, it could be looking around, it could be just taking my voice, it could be ignoring my voice. Whatever that honors your system is the one that you get the A+ for. You get the gold star, the extra cookie, whatever the achievement side of you wants to be driven to. And I say this from this knowing of really, really wanting to follow guided instructions and sometimes needing to really just honor what it is that's naturally occurring within my system. So I
That's great.
really just want to encourage everyone to do that. That being said, I want to just kind of go through the body in places that the body can hold traumas and tension. So we're just going to touch into it energetically. For those of you that are familiar with Shinzen's system, it's going to be more of a feel out kind of meditation, just kind of working with the body sensations. Some of the sensations you might come into contact may not obviously feel out. They may be more of a feel in or something different. That's all good. But we're kind of just staying in the realm of sensations for this one.
Excellent. And I also realized that we can go over some of the details of your background and your training, which I think is significant. I was just talking to, I was trying to like explain, like very quickly say, like, this person's view is worth paying attention to. Like I was just, there's a million voices out there. But Layla has, I was talking to, a couple people and I was like, I'm pretty sure Layla has more training than all of us combined. Like Layla has been involved in and working in developing her teaching skills for a very long time in a lot of different contexts, but also for me personally, more importantly than that, has been practicing very intensely for a very long time. And so I hold a lot of trust. And if folks don't know right now, Layla is also co-teaching with me in the Progress of Shinsight course. So we are actively working in that way. So just a little bit of
And if I could
background.
just add in, Janusz, you know me as my birth name, which is Layla, and that's why you're referring to me. Some people on this podcast have never heard of that name. So, and
And
either way, yeah.
I appreciate you mentioning it because I try to do the switch as Aishin, which is your endowed name from Shinzen, and I think that I'm doing it all the time. I think if you were to ask me, I would have just said, yeah, of course, I did that each time it came up. So, Aishin Leonard, thank you so much for that, which is what I call you 99% of the time in my mind. But yeah, so thank you for
Yeah.
that. I appreciate that. So yeah, so Aishin is someone that I look to and trust. And Rory's asking, what's the meaning of Aishin?
Oh, so the Shin of Aishin is Shinzan's Shin, which, Janusz, you might need to correct me. I believe it's the authenticity, truth that symbol means. And I love. So it's kind of the way that I like to think of it is my true nature is love, not kind of true love, but it very much resonates with both the way that I came into understanding myself and what I see as the result of understanding myself.
That's lovely. Excellent. Okay. So with that, we're going to transition into the guided portion. Aishin, how do you want? I realize there's layers of technology happening here. Do you want to do just bells on your side? It might be easiest if bells or even just signaling. If you don't have a bell, then you can just say, okay, we'll begin and we'll end, that kind of thing. I realize I often will do it on my side, but then it'll be a timing issue and getting, it's probably easier if you handle that side. Does that work for you?
I do have a bell on instant timer, if that works.
What
Normally I
it's
just kind
literally
of
your
guide people
preference.
out.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. There's no bell requirement by any means. It's just
All right.
and when I say bell, I just mean signal. Okay,
Yeah,
so great. So
yeah.
you'll handle the whole thing. No need to use a bell if you prefer not. It's not like we're bell addicted. Okay, excellent. So folks, we're going to begin, and I'm very appreciative about this theme of trusting yourself. And actually, question before we begin, for folks who either few categories, right? Because there are people who may have clear trauma that they're aware of. For folks who potentially don't have trauma, for folks who potentially may have trauma, but they're sort of like, nah, it's not such a big deal right now. I mean, I feel like I definitely had a lot of experiences with trauma, and it's not at the foreground for me, but it's often a good thing to reassess. Or folks who, well, I guess you're probably going to cover the folks who may not know they have trauma. I'm sure that'll probably be in there. So for the folks who don't know if they have trauma, they're a little unsure or feel pretty certain that they might not, how do they relate to this practice we're about to do?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. We're going to be working through the body energetically. So the idea is we're not going to be touching into content of trauma. And that's kind of the one thing as you start to do this practice, you find yourself getting really stuck in the content of what that energy is holding, that's a good indication to actually back off a little bit. That it's just touching into that part often is enough work for the day. So even just coming to that point of recognizing, okay, there's a story behind this energy, just bringing awareness to that and then backing off. There's no need to kind of go into the heart of darkness on the first time coming into contact and letting it blow away your ego into oblivion. I would not recommend that at all, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's finding that, and I suspect that most people who are going to be following along with this meditation aren't going to be triggered. We're not going to be working with triggers. It's just sometimes the places that you might discover here are places that you never realized energy in your system is being held. And I just want to take a moment to kind of emphasize, I know I use the word trauma a lot, which in of itself is traumatizing to many people. It's triggering. Nobody wants to be the one that raises their hand and says, I have trauma, yay. And everyone has this, is what I'm talking about. These are the challenges that we came across in our life that we somehow feel that we did not respond to in the way that we would have liked to respond to. Now that could be because socially we just decided, nope, let me lock that down. That's not appreciated here. Or maybe because there was an actual threat. And in order to get out of that situation, we responded it in a different way. So there's this acknowledgement that the way that we responded was skillful, but that energy can live inside our system and still just want to respond in the way that it originally did. And that's kind of what we're going to be touching into. So strong energy and content around that energy are good signs to just back off, give yourself some kindness. If you don't know what that feels like, just back off a little bit, relax, don't pay attention to me, zone out. Yeah.
That's great. And somebody just dropped something, Nick just dropped something here in the chat, which I'm going to just summarize. Given your backstory, which we'll get into after the meditation, related to pain, and if pain is a teacher, then that's sort of this extremely, I also qualify as this high level of training where I listen to Aishin's view often with a special clarity. I try to have a special clarity because Aishin, you've described being a chronic pain sufferer, and your meditation tools they can't just hang out on the realm of theoretical.
Yeah,
Does that sound about accurate for you?
Yeah, as you know, I came into practice because of pain. It was because I was experiencing suicidal amounts of pain. I could not even breathe without being overwhelmed by the amount of pain that I was experiencing. And it was at that point of desperation, of really not feeling like there was anything else in this world. And I am that person. I need to do everything else before I want to do the thing that I don't really want to do, which staring at my navel was not something in my mind brought pain relief.
Yeah.
And I finally got to a point where I kept getting that image of the monk that self-immolated in the 60s in my head. And to me, it was just this photographic, just this realization that there is something out there that enables human beings to be with that kind of pain. I could not imagine what that was. But it was the proof that I needed to figure that out. So I moved into a monastery for about a year, tried to get the Sri Lankan, vibe of what it is that they're doing. I got a lot of, songs and rites and ritual practices done, which was beautiful. And I could not figure out how to meditate because I wasn't getting any trauma-informed instruction, basically. And I tortured myself for a year, thinking literally every single time I came to sat down, it was this feeling of, can I actually torture myself to death this time? Because I feel like that is how I get out of pain. And doing that for a year, I realize now in retrospect, I actually was traumatizing my system. I was making my system more sensitive to pain. I was really, really resisting the pain and just conditioning those grooves of resistance in new spiritual ways. And, it was actually having to sit down and stare at my pain, eyeball to eyeball. And that is when all of a sudden it was this realization that, oh my God, this is a teacher. It is not the image I get in my head is like some kind of master just trying to whip me into shape. It's not that at all. It's not that relentless it is relentless but it's not a bad or evil force, which I
Mm,
think is what my body had always thought. Pain is bad, evil, don't want it, should be living pain free, should be experiencing the best of my life, late 20s. I shouldn't want to die. I should be riding that wave of achievement, accomplishment. And yeah, so this is kind of the work that I've been doing is, just how do you sit with that which is so unbearable you want to pass out?
yeah.
That which is so unbearable, every part of you says no.
Yeah.
What's the skillful thing there? And years of bypassing, going with trauma work, pain work, and starting to kind of feel like it's all falling into place exactly the way that it needs to be.
Yeah. It's like what I sort of think about is that, uh, or what I mean, I think I've mentioned this to you before. Like the joke I say is there's people who are aware of their trauma and their pain, and then there's people who uh, think that they don't have it, right? And then there's like somewhere out there is Steve. Like that's the third category. It's like, and in this world that we have today, that is, we're in a traumatizing situation. The whole world is in this very intense, confusing, strange time. So I just want to say the skills that we're talking about here are very much universal from my experience. And so I'm very excited for this. Okay, so we're going to transition here into the practice itself. I'll let Layla do any setting up that Layla wants to do. And let's see. Okay, making sure everything is in place. I'm going to make my audio. Oh, actually, I realized you might not have audio in this. That's exactly right. For the with it in this scene. See, this is all the
Yeah.
tech that's not really no one cares about but me. In the scene where you are, will you speak for a second so I can hear your audio?
A, B,
There
C,
it
D,
is.
E, F,
I
G.
found it. Okay. Just copy that into this window. Okay, you should be there, and I'm going to mute myself when we transition.
Excellent.
Okay, excellent. So I'll hit the transition screen, and you can see me in the other monitor. So, and then whenever you're ready, we'll begin. And
Great.
the timer says 25 minutes, but if you go over, it's not a big deal.
Okay. Let's see how it goes.
Ready?
So I want to invite everyone to find a position that works for your body. And I want to actually, before we get into stillness and silence and closing our eyes, I want to actually encourage you to do a practice called orienting, which literally is looking around your room, using that neck to turn your head around and scanning your environment. What we're doing in this practice here is we're actually sending signals to the body that where you are going to be sitting at is safe. We live in these animal bodies that are wired to constantly scan our environment for threats. But if we actually just take a moment to consciously do this and not leave it to the unconscious to hold on to, but to just bring awareness to the fact that where you are right now is relatively safe. There's no tigers hanging out there. So just allowing yourself to look around and see if you can just notice the things that give you comfort, safety, taking them in. By moving the neck, you're also stretching the vagus nerve. And this is the polyvagal theory that the vagus nerve is a freeway of information between the central nervous system and the brain and the rest of the interoceptive neurons that are all over your body. And connecting these two together sometimes can give you exactly what it is that you need to just feel a level of safety and comfort. So allowing yourself to just check in with yourself, noticing how you feel in the body. It might feel the same. It might feel worse. It might feel better. It's all good. We're just noticing it. And if you'd like to at this point, you can go ahead and close the eyes. But if it feels more comfortable, more safe to keep them open, I'd like to encourage you to do so. Even if this is the first time you have, give it a shot. And we're just going to encourage the body to rest and relax in different places where we can hold energy and tension in just the challenges and adversity of life. The first place I'd like to invite your attention to is the skeletal muscles in your body, allowing the awareness to take in the sensations of the muscles. If you find your attention always wanting to go into a place of discomfort, that's okay. But see if you can include more of your body when that happens, just adjusting the aperture of your awareness, noticing sensations and allowing them, releasing, relaxing, letting go. If you find the mind picking up a story about what it's doing, or that it doesn't know what it's doing, or that it found something, or whatever the mind is telling you right now, just allowing that, but putting it in the background, not giving it attention, just redirecting the attention into the sensations of the skeletal muscle. And if it helps, we're trying to actually notice the fascia around the muscle, that membrane of neurons that encapsulates all our muscles. And just inviting release, relaxation. Now this is a really good place and you feel like there's a lot of juice, for lack of a better word here. I invite you actually to honor that. Stay here. There's a lot of information in that fascia, the skeletal muscles. And it might be the perfect thing to just ignore the rest of this meditation and go with that. And if you would like to explore other places, I want to invite you to bring your awareness to the smooth muscles in the body, the organs, the viscera that surrounds these organs. When our muscles fail to tense around activation and energy in the body, often our organs can take that. Sending the invitation to the organs to release, to relax. If finding sensation here is challenging or difficult, or you find the mind really wanting to know more about what it is that you need to do, I want to encourage you to just be. Sensations may be present, they may not. It may be strong, it may be subtle. Just trusting your being. If you find the mind getting lost, it's okay. Just letting the mind get lost and bringing the attention back into the sensations. Finding the sensations is too challenging to bring awareness into. Asking the question, if I could feel sensations there, what would it feel like? And letting the body respond, staying with whatever the response is, honoring that response as an energetic message. Hanging out with the viscera of your organs is giving you a lot. It feels skillful to stay. I invite you at this point to stay. You'd like to explore the next region of the body. We're going to be moving into the central nervous system. So the brain and the spinal cord, feeling the sensations located in the spinal cord, in the brain. If that's an alien or foreign concept that your mind is getting tripped up over, it's okay. Let the mind get confused. Just ask yourself if there were sensations there, if I could feel them, what would it be? What would it feel like? Feeling into that response wherever it is in the body and honoring your body, allowing that energy to be known. Inviting the sensations, not racing against, not pushing away, not even wishing that they would just go away because the next moment might be better than this. Inviting yourself to allow them, fall into them. Now, if staying with the central nervous system is really helpful for you at this point, please stay there. Honor that knowing that's coming from your body. If you would like to, we're going to explore the one last place that the body tends to store this energy in the university of life, and that is within the bones. Allowing your awareness to drop into your skeleton. Asking the question, if I could feel bones, what would it feel like? Not seeking it out, but allowing the sensation to come to you. There's nothing to do here. Just relax in your own being. And I invite you in this moment to really check in with your body. You may be discovering new places in that interior landscape that are so delicious and yummy. There may be a siren's call to that which is challenging, overwhelming. And I really just want to invite you to check in with the system and see, are you still in that window of tolerance? Or have you gotten more to the overwhelm side? Overwhelm can manifest as a lot of activity, but it can also manifest as a feeling of being shut down. So if you find that you've plopped out of that window of tolerance on either side, it's okay. Just checking in, seeing how you know that, and allowing yourself to take a break, take care of yourself. If you feel that you're actually in that zone, that window of tolerance, really honoring what your body feels is helpful right now to continue to stay in any of those locations. Or put one last piece here to integrate it. To do that, kind of just drop the sensations of the body for one moment and just ask a simple question of your body, that deep wisdom you're touching into. Just asking yourself, in the past 24 hours, thinking of a time you most felt like yourself, almost like the way you would like to feel. And perhaps it's just the least unsettled and anxious. Seeing if you can bring that into your body. It might be through the mind's eye, really bringing in the environment of that time where you notice that. It might be more of a kinesthetic memory coming to you. Just tuning in, allowing yourself to recall what it feels like to most feel like itself. Hint, guys, there's nothing to do. Just be. You come into contact with sensations that feel most like you, almost like the way you would like to feel, or even just a little less of the difficulty you have been feeling. Allow yourself to take in that contrast. Contrast might be a sensation somewhere where there was none, a different sensation, a different texture, a weight, a solidity, a shape, a movement. Just being curious, not chasing after it, letting it in. Just noticing your body, allowing the sensations, honoring the wisdom that your body is giving you right now. It's telling you, stay here, do something else, honoring that message. If you find yourself losing touch with that sensation, of feeling most like yourself, or how the way you would like to feel. Okay. Allowing yourself to just bring it back however it feels accessible. It might be a different memory. It might be a memory in the past few days, weeks. Your body knows. Allowing your body to come back there, to feel it, to be curious about it. Different states of energy moving through you. And if you have made contact with parts of the self that feel overwhelming, it's okay. Allowing yourself to really feel it's going to be okay. It may not feel okay, but it will be okay. Tuning in to that flavor. Wherever you are right now, as we start to just make the small transition, just acknowledging where you are. How do you know that? Seeing if you can give yourself appreciation for that capacity just to know. Resting in your own knowing. Start making a slow transition. Seeing if you can open that aperture of awareness now. Everything in the body, all those systems we started off in. Skeletal, smooth, spinal, brain, bones, bringing it in. Feeling the sensation and honoring what your body wants to do. It might want to adjust, stretch, move a little. And if there is no impulse to move, I actually want to encourage you to just wiggle those fingers and toes a little bit. Feel that energy. Allow that energy to move in the body. Checking in with those joints. Oftentimes when we come into contact with these overwhelming energies that have been locked inside, our body can actually lock down. And as meditators, we tend to be really good at locking down in stillness and in silence. So allowing yourself to move. If the shoulders need to stretch, letting the shoulders stretch. If the neck needs to move, letting it move. Moving the wrist around. Allowing the back to move. Maybe the knees, ankles. We really actually lock a lot up in our hips, knees, and ankles when it comes to this stuff. Just honoring any movement. Checking in with yourself. If you haven't opened your eyes, allowing light to slowly come in and being really kind to yourself. And as you allow more and more of this present moment in, if there is any residue of those sensations of the self that you would like to feel more still there, see if you can just tap into that a little as you also notice everything that's currently around you. The body, the environment, giving yourself lots of kindness, lots of time. And of course, remembering to breathe. Allowing yourself to just take a few breaths, check in, and take the time that you need. We're going to officially close this meditation here, but if you need a few moments to just check in as we talk, please do that. Honor your body. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Layla, that was so lovely. So lovely to hear you guide that practice. I've heard you guide other similar practices, but that one was very sweet. Lovely. So what we'll do is I want to hear people's reports. So yeah, what are people's experience? What was that like? What happened, and what do you like now? That's always very helpful for me to hear. And I also wanted to invite folks, if you would like to join us, I think by audio on Zoom. What I'm going to do, let's see if this command works. I programmed it last night. We'll see if it works. Yes, it does. You can join us over here on Zoom. Just let us know if you're going to, because I have to sort of arrange windows and this kind of thing. So, and I think I have to admit you in so we don't get spammed by trolls. But if you have an audio question or report, it'd be great to hear that. It's a little, I was asking Aishin before what your preference is. And Aishin was saying, seeing and hearing is ideal. Next after that would be just hearing. Next after that is maybe somewhere on the list is text. So text reports and questions are helpful and excellent, and we encourage that. And if you want to jump on the Zoom, that'll actually give us a little bit more juice to,
Yes.
get into the details of your questions. So as folks ramp up to do that, I know there's often a little ramp up period where people are getting used to or getting ready to ask their questions or give their reports. I wanted to just jump into a few of the things I was thinking about, which is, let's do I want to do the official sort of the official bio here, because it's a delight for me to go through. So along with the along with the training in life through the process of very intensive pain work that you described. I see somebody just joined us on Zoom. So hold on real quick here, Carolyn. We'll be with you very shortly. I just want to get through this. Aishin Leonard is also a certified mindfulness teacher, certified through UCLA, a trained somatic experiencing guide, certified mindfulness self-compassion teacher from the Center for Mindful Compassion, certified guide through Shinzen Young's Unified Mindfulness System, certified mindfulness in nature instructor through Mark Coleman's multi-year training, participant in the Dedicated Practitioners and the Community Dharma Leaders program at Spirit Rock, which the one from Spirit Rock, I've also participated in the Community Dharma Leaders training. So that's a lovely experience that we share. And then trained to teach through Tanisara and Kitasaro, who are wonderful teachers in Dhammapala, at Dhammapala in South Africa. So those are just a few of the technical details. So I just wanted to share those. So I'm going to go through my the questions that I had in mind, and we'll go from there. And we'll obviously check in with other people's experiences and their questions and this kind of thing. So actually, we have some reports here in the chat. So my questions are definitely secondary to other people's reports and experiences. So Rory reports, I like the intention to stay in a particular aspect of this is my dyslexia kicking in. I like the intention to stay in a particular aspect if that was productive. Okay. I stayed with muscle tension, jaw, neck, shoulder, but later tried the brain spinal cord, which was new and interesting. Excellent.
Excellent, Rory. Yeah. So happy to hear that you're staying with what your body wants you to stay with. Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciated that part of the meditation too, that there was sort of layers of options. And I especially like the instruction around sort of a lot of what you talked about around the skeleton, because there's this level of like micro muscle tension that is, we really don't, it's often below even the threshold of detection for most people. And for me, sometimes I'll realize there's a lot more relaxing to be done, even though it feels like I'm relaxed. I'm a professional relaxer. I don't need to relax anymore. Alex Rainleaf says, "What a wonderful offering. Thank you so much, Aishin. I felt a moment of profound appreciation for my body and its innate wisdom after going through the various systems. Very beautiful."
Thank you. I'm just gonna take that in. It's yeah. The small little ego wants to come in and claim that one, but that was not me at all. That was just you noticing the you that's always been there. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so Carolyn, I think we might be in business. Okay, how goes it?
All right, I think I have it figured out. So I really enjoyed the meditation, and I especially liked meditating on the fascia and the bones. It never occurred to me ever to do that before, so it was really something special. So thank you. One of the things I notice is generally when I feel so today I felt really good when I sat down to meditate. And then as I was working through the fascia, sometimes I get this kind of sick, hollow feeling, and it definitely triggered it when I was sitting on the cushion, and I followed your advice and I stayed away from it. But how would you work with that in general?
Yeah.
I feel like it's a trigger of something. I don't really know of what.
Mm-hmm.
So I just suddenly, and normally eating puts it away, which isn't a solid skill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I suspect that you might be coming into contact with just a somatic patterning around some kind of challenge that the body feels it needs to have this pattern. It's not a big deal. Everyone has these patterns, but coming to know our specific individual ones is kind of the delight of practice because we can get to know ourselves in this really intimate way. So just kind of acknowledging that this is probably a patterning in your system. It's okay. Now you know these steps. There's one part of me that wants to suggest if this feels like that is a strong pattern that you feel a lot, chances are there are actual things that are coming up kind of before you're aware of that interaction. Tracing that patterning back to like the very subtlest thing of maybe it's like a tingle in like the side of your neck, and that's right before something else happens that kind of feels like this, and then something else goes like this, and then you get that stomach thing. Tracing that pattern back can really actually help it not get so tangled up in itself. So that's one thing, but I also want to just encourage, when it feels, I really want to emphasize that honoring that you did in your system of when it felt like, oh, that was a little too much. There's a concept in somatic experiencing called titration, which is just one drop of discomfort can be more than enough for your system to start to metabolize that discomfort in the way that it needs to learn how to metabolize it. If we spend our whole time just avoiding, let's just focus on the good stuff. We get really good at avoiding stuff. We get really good at staying, positive. But when the challenge comes and you have no option to do it, then you're going to find yourself kind of, without having footing on the ground. So just working one drop at a time can be helpful, and really honoring that, it's like I said, the siren's call to work with difficulty is a real thing, and it can be very harmful to follow it through. So honoring what the system feels, it's going to feel after it does just one drop, it's going to feel like, oh, I can take on 2 drops. I can take on a whole handful. Next it's a gallon. Then you're going to be bathing in it. It will naturally come that way, but just one drop at a time. If you find that going to that one drop, all of a sudden you're like in the heart of that, whatever it was, and it's just really overwhelming. The instructions that I gave in the meditation of just kind of expanding the awareness out a little bit and then go to something else. See, we just want to allow the awareness to notice everything else. It's that negativity bias that we're working against. The one that's just like, oh, that is so unpleasant. I need to figure that out. I need to be with that. And who cares about this good or the neutral stuff? No way. Let's sit with that really bad one. Being able to just take a drop, expand the awareness, move somewhere else can be really, really skillful way to work with it. You're describing as just, that actually feels like an older, overwhelming energy that kind of comes online. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a tendency to sort of bludgeon these feelings. So I kind of like the idea of giving it a little bit more space as well, and being perhaps a little bit nicer to myself. I
Yeah.
like the idea of the titration too.
Yeah. If I could just reflect that wisdom of that's coming out and being nicer to yourself, I cannot encourage you more for that. I was talking to somebody in a Janish's Insight course online and saying that, that kindness capacity in our awareness, when we are dealing with suffering, kindness is that opposite movement. For me, it feels like suffering is like this. It's like, I need to go away, or we want to do this to it. And kindness feels like it's the opposite movement it does. Instead of go away, I hate you, I don't want to experience you, kindness says, it's okay. We can be with this for a little bit. We might need to expand awareness out. We might just need a 1 second with it, but it's okay. And when your body can feel that it's okay feeling, that's that same quality that I was speaking of just honoring what's coming up. When the system feels like you're listening to it, that you're being kind to it, that's where the wisdom is going to start to flow from you. You can trust in yourself.
Thank you.
So great to hear from you.
Thank you so much. And I just put the Zoom back into the chat if anyone else wants to ask a question. As you can tell, the questions and answers get very lively when Aishin can actually connect and hear the details. It's really helpful. So great. So I had some questions which I've wondered, because we've known each other for some time, but I feel like I still haven't necessarily sort of, we can always know someone a little bit more. So I'd be curious, because we have this interesting background where we're both practitioners and teachers. We're both people who are steeped in the process of experiencing this material and going through it and helping our own lives, but also actively working to support other people. So some of my questions, I think, I'm curious, like, well, how does this question relate to teaching, and how does it relate to actually just as a practitioner? So what do you wish was in place? Really, I feel like it's, in a way, it's one saying, it could be the same question. What do you wish had been there or had been around for you when you began practicing meditation that wasn't there, that you had to discover and find over time?
I think it's exactly the teacher that I am. It's the one that wants to encourage people to honor their process, to not bypass themselves, to not think that somehow they are not already complete or perfect and they need to seek out a guru or a teacher that's going to make them that weird version of themselves that they see in the future that somehow is the solution to what we feel in the moment. And I feel that if I had actually met a teacher who kind of saw the potential that was already in me and just nourished that without telling me to follow them in their path, that would have been very, very helpful. Simply because of all the pain and trauma, my body doesn't follow other paths. I haven't met a teacher that experiences that kind of pass out pain and trauma and still wants to, encourage people to do that. So that's kind of why, guys, that's why I am the way I am. I always encourage people to honor you, the people that I work with. It's all for me. It's getting their inner guru online. I want to hear the teachings of the people that I work with, because there's so much wisdom in every single being. And that's the beauty of living in this place.
That's great. And 19860 says, Aishin became the teacher she needed. I think that, I don't know, I mean, to me, that feels like that's the goal of anyone's practice, whether we're formally supporting other people or not, is to become the teacher we need. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I feel that it's kind of the only thing that we can actually be. Anything less than that is not actually being. It's trying to create something that we are not. And, I think it's Shinzen that says, there's so many people in the world. There's no reason why you need to be anything else other than yourself. People will come to you. You don't need to go out and actively, be something in order to attract people. People actually, the best kind of attraction I find as a teacher is when I am authentically showing up and somebody sees that and says, oh, that's something that I'm looking for. Let's try reaching out to that person. And that's just who I am. That being said, I know a lot of teachers who don't approach that way, and I have a lot of respect for them. So this is just a personal thing that I know in my system. I appreciate being able to be authentic to my process, to manifest in the world as an authenticity, and to encourage others to also live in their authenticity.
That's so great. And you and I both share a friendship and a sort of having been guided by a teacher named Larry Yang, who is lovely. And I remember Larry, one of the things that I think was most significant about what Larry taught me was that whatever I deny within myself, I'm going to unconsciously suppress in anyone I help and support. So a lot of my role is to experience whatever I can, the deepest, pain, the deepest processing, my puppy barking in the middle of the live stream. Puppy never barks. What's up, Sela? Sela. Shh. Anyway, and so to that end, I realized that as guides, as teachers, we can experience. I mean, I've noticed a sort of unconscious sort of atmosphere of we're not supposed to have difficulties. We're not supposed to have challenges. We're not supposed to, have times when we're down. There's sort of like this pressure of like, but you're always supposed to be up. Like, how could you have a difficult time and still be someone that I might turn to for support? And that's a generation, I think that's changing generationally. So the question that I had for you, and again, obviously you can monitor your own level of self-disclosure, but what in your experience is a time that was, effectively very difficult, very challenging that, you might not normally hear a teacher talk about? You talk a little bit about having pain to such a degree that it almost felt like you were suicidal, or it did feel like you were suicidal. I usually don't hear teachers sort of talk about it in that way. It's usually much more, refined and like, oh, I could imagine someone feeling suicidal in a situation like this. And so, yeah, are there any situations that were great teachers? So maybe it's the same one, but are great teachers that, you have had pressure to not really open up about?
I don't know about feeling pressure to not open. I definitely resonate with your, what I carry actually is, because sharing my story of working with pain and trauma is, a really intense story. I know that sometimes sharing that can actually, be very, very overwhelming to others. And in that knowing, I tend to hold my story back. I tend to kind of gloss over the fact that, yeah, I was in pain and I was suicidal, but I don't go on and on and on about what about that experience was so overwhelming. Why, the playback that slows it down. That's something that I actually don't really share too much with people, simply because I don't want to overwhelm people with that. So that's, yeah. And that's a lot of the small ego thinking that, it needs to control, it needs to present something that it needs to present in a way that it feels that it is not, in order to feel what it doesn't feel.
Yeah. And there's also, I mean, you've talked about this, there's a degree of compassion in that too, because like the titration and the meditation that you described, like you have to meet people where they are. And if you exceed that line, but you've talked about how, I believe you mentioned this, that people like leaving your class because it's just too intense. Wasn't that a story that you described at one point?
Yeah. I've definitely had people leave the class because what I shared was too intense and they weren't at a place to be able to take it, or just because, I work with people that have really, really severe amounts of pain, like complex regional pain syndrome is one of the populations that I work with. And that's the most painful pain condition known to man. It is those suicidal levels of pain, because it's so much to take into the system, and to have that constantly be there and have no break from it. That's when the mind just needs some kind of release. And if it's the release that means there is no more experience after that, at least that one's a release. And when you don't experience anything else, I deeply understand the draw to doing something like that.
Yeah.
And kindness, compassion, those are the soothing balms for the part of us that cannot be with that. It's this idea that you don't give yourself kindness or compassion in order to feel better. You give it to yourself because you don't feel good. And that's all that is. There's no object to feel better in that. And that's where people kind of get a little mixed up. especially when you're suffering and you hear someone say, oh, just be kind to yourself, things will go away. And then they have this idea of things going away and you're actually just resisting the suffering now in a new convenient kindness package. But if you really understand that the purpose of kindness is to embrace the suffering, it's to be with it in an intimacy that it's actually calling out for. I feel that suffering actually is that. It's these parts of ourselves that need that attention, that love, that nourishment that it did not get in those moments that it was created. And because it was so strong of a yearning, it locks within us and it seeks and seeks and seeks and tries to find it. The teaching for me is to recognize that all the external seeking that I've done in this world until the point where I started to really be eyeball to eyeball with that stuff. It wasn't until that I recognized that all that searching was actually searching for this being that's in here that just didn't recognize its own loving potential, its own goodness, its own nourishing quality that I was trying to find in the world.
Yeah. And what are, I'm curious about your life and how you got here. Who are some of the people that, teachers or not teachers, people in your life who were, central pillars? Who were the people who really the guides, whether they were sort of meditation or Dharma guides, that made it possible for you to be and have become who you are today?
I feel that while I don't really, I'm not as much into Buddhism as my teachers are. My teachers, Kirisawa and Tanisara, I feel were profoundly influential in my life simply because their way of sharing practice is through Kuan Yin. And that Kuan Yin, it's basically compassion incarnate. And that was exactly what I needed to come into contact with, the ability to be kind to myself, to anything. Just having that kind of delivery of compassion to me was exactly what my system needed. To this day, I definitely love Kuan Yin practices. And I also know that there's limitations in that. Not everyone wants to be a Buddhist and, chant for 8 hours and bow thousands of times to compassion incarnate. So I feel that those are definitely primary teachers. And then, of course, Shunzen. While I swear he still doesn't know my name, even though I use the name he gave me. The way that his system and the breaking down of a system in a way that I guess my mind just latched on and said, oh, that's what's going on here. That see, hear, feel deconstruction technique. I understood what it was. Oh, I just noticed my microphone switched, so let me know if it's changed. But
it's fine. It sounds a little different, but it's fine.
My batteries ran out. But Shinzen's technique of see, hear, feel, and kind of breaking down the individual aspects of one's experience gave me that clarity. I had that same experience that a lot of people that have been in the UM system talk about, where somebody comes from a different system but doesn't have clarity but has concentration equanimity. If you teach them clarity, all of a sudden their practice kind of shoots up. And that was my experience of just having clarity. All of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, everything is see, hear, feel. Even the me that I think it is actually this process of see, hear, feel. I remember reaching out to you, Janusz, and just being like, I have not gotten out of bed for a week because that realization was too much for my system to handle.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's one of the nice things. This is sort of inside baseball, but one of the things that happens as you go deeper on the path and as you, especially as you begin to guide other people, is there is a kind of isolation that can occur where there's fewer and fewer people who know sort of what your experience is and what you're talking about. And I think that, Layla and I came into contact because at first I was guiding you and giving, some background or at least some input to, my experience. And then it just became much more parallel in large part because I identified so much with your experience and, all the work that you had done and all of the inside experience that you had had. So yeah, I just want to give that plug and just share a little appreciation for everything that you've brought to help me with for quite some time. So it's so appreciated. And now folks are letting us know that someone says the sound sounds even better. So always improving, folks. So I have a couple more questions. One is about, we are in a time of really dramatic change right now, and something I talk about now and then, not all the time, not each time we get together, but is my experience of race in this country, my experience as a white person who presents very strongly as male. And you've been super, such a great partner in talking about your own experience as someone who suffers of pain, a woman of color, and it's really hard to orient ourselves right now. How do we take this practice and relate it to some of these experiences? Because there's a real dichotomy. On one side, there's this sort of, if we use the tools of deconstructing pain, for instance, there can be a sense that there's just less and less of a self. It's more ethereal. It's more abstract to some degree. And there's identity decreases. And so it can create this idea then that talking about those pieces of where we fit in or where we experience our identities or how those things relate, well, that's bad, or there's something wrong there. And just wanted to open that up a little bit and just leave a little bit of a platform for you to talk about any of that material, any piece of that constellation, and how do we relate the tools of this transcendent material for something that is very worldly, very present, very a challenge that is very clearly at the foreground of human difficulty now. Small question.
I think that my perspective is unique in that the result of my progress in the spiritual realm, we can call it, is the direct result of the amount of suffering I experienced. It was the coil that had to go all the way to one end to basically spring back to the other side. And it's suffering that woke me up. It took, I am very stubborn. It took tremendous amount of suffering for this system to wake up, and it never would have had it not experienced that. I know that about myself. And so there's a part of me that genuinely is very appreciative for the amount of suffering that I have and do suffer from, because it is the very soil in which the lotus springs from. We don't have freedom from suffering without suffering. And if you have a lot of suffering, you get a lot of freedom from suffering. And that is kind of what I feel like our country is at. We are at a point where that coil is going into that suffering and energy is building up. You can just see it in the people that are out there. There is a lot of energy behind suffering. And when it gets to that point where it just is, it's all the energy it can get, my experience is it goes to the other place just naturally, but it needs to go there. And unfortunately, going in that direction, I can see in our countries, it feels like it needs to go further, which is a lot of, compassion and just a lot of sadness in me as well. I don't like seeing people suffer, even though I genuinely know that everyone is suffering from exactly what they need to suffer from in order to wake up from the delusion that they are suffering to begin with. It's still not a nice thing. Feeling suicidal with pain is not a nice thing. Nobody would want to wish that on somebody else. But in that, I feel like there's also the answer to get to the other side. Because the more you reject the fact that you're suffering, the more you are unwilling to actually meet what it is that is, for lack of a better word, it's the break on which your authenticity feels like it's permitted to come forth through you. All of that, it's when we come into contact with that, that's how that energy moves from building to moving. And it really is, I feel in this time, it's coming into contact with the fact that people are in a lot of pain. And it may not be a pain that you directly have the experience to understand how and why and where it is, but all of us have the experience of pain. All of us know what it's like not to be understood, not to be seen, not to be valued, to be thought of littler than you know you are. that's a painful thing. That's the pain of not actually seeing your own authenticity within you. And it's one of the worst. But when we can really feel that in ourselves, we can recognize it in others. And in that is the bond, the creative side of what humanity feels like it has the potential for, when we can just recognize our pain. Then all of a sudden it's not I am suffering and you are not, or there's no more competition in that. It is just one human being doing the best that they can, some of the worst pain that they know that they have, meeting another human being doing the exact same. And that other human being may not be dealing with that pain in a way that you feel is skillful, but you know what pain they're in and what that can lead somebody to do. And in that is infinite understanding. That's why, for me, looking at both sides of what's going on right now in our society, the left and the right, there's just so much compassion because there's so much pain. And it really feels like if only we could see the pain on the other side without somehow feeling like they're not in pain, that's when those energies can come in and actually make that shift, that change that everyone is really hungry for. Well, actually, not everyone is really hungry for. Those of us who are actually feeling that pain are hungry for.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. The theme that you're describing here throughout it is a kind of like a denial of pain, because I think about is it the fact that we're all locked down? So, and, the economy's, beginning to tank. Is that why the pain is? Or is it that suddenly all of the things that we used to do to cover up the pain suddenly are unavailable? And now the pain that was already there just rises to the surface and people are, seeing this experience. And also then one side saying like, your pain isn't valid, or like, you can't feel pain, I feel pain, is again, the same sort of self-denial that we embody.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to say that for anyone out there listening and coming into contact of like, that's what I'm doing, there's a lot of skillfulness in denying pain too, right? We can only meet it when we're able, when we have the capacity to meet it. So I really want to just, there's not a reason to beat yourself up over when you acknowledge that you have been ignoring your pain or bypassing it. But just in that simple acknowledgement, once you have that knowledge dropped within you, there's actually no changing back. But there's no reason to beat yourself up. This is all part of what it is to kind of get to know ourselves.
Excellent. So I definitely have more questions. Just want to remind folks, if you're just joining us here for the first time, please feel free to hit the follow button. That'll let you know when we're going live again. I am strongly enthused about having Aishin on again soon. So if you want to find out when we go live or any other work that we're doing here, please feel free to hit that follow button, and that will make you part of our community here. The question I wanted to ask next.
There's one little piece that I wanted to add to the whole, like, we need to be in our pain and that's how we change things. That is exactly what I teach with the law officers that I worked with. So for about a year, I was working with police officers that had PTSD. And it was, the PTSD that comes from basically spending decades of your life every day answering phone calls that are somebody else's worst moment of their life. And then not even getting a chance to decompress. It's just call after call after call, responding, and a culture that's very much this denial of pain, right? We kind of assume that strength is a denial of pain. And actually working with all those officers, my job was to actually show them that strength isn't denial of pain. Strength is feeling that pain, of actually not pushing it away, but understanding that you are a human being that suffers. And embracing that can feel vulnerable, but staying in vulnerability is such a tremendous act of courage. So few people do it. Encouraging law officers to do that, all of a sudden I started getting reports of them saying, I pulled someone over and ordinarily I would have pulled out my gun and arrested them, but because I felt that they were having pain, that they were just struggling and trying to do the best that they could, it enabled me not to hold my gun, to just talk to them like a human being and connect on that level. And those are the kinds of reports, just report after report after report. The people that, very much feel that it's their obligation to control people and to all the other stuff, it can transform tremendously in just being able to be with one's own pain. All of a sudden, the universe reflects it in everyone. And life is no longer an isolating experience, but a very connecting one, and a connection to what people can't even be with.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I know that you mentioned this earlier, but I just want to make this, I'll ask a very leading question. What's your thoughts on people doing this process alone without maybe the support that you and I have discovered or hopefully embodied to some degree over time?
This is what I always tell people. I think it's completely possible. The Buddha did it. So one can awaken by themselves of their own. And there is an acceleration of practice when one works with Sangha, which is, other people that are also on this path with you. It's, I know that my own journey, it's pretty quick, the amount of time that I spent meditating to get to these things in comparison to some of the other people I meet. And I know that it's both a reflection of the amount of suffering that I've had to work with. Unfortunately, severe chronic pain is a teacher that never gives up on you all day long. But there's also, what was I going to go on? Remind me what we were talking about. I totally lost that strand.
Just the about people doing it alone.
Oh, yeah. Not just teachers, I feel actually more than teachers, but having people that are able to consistently be with you as you go through the journey of discovering yourself is if you can find people that offer you that reflection that one needs in order to see their shadows, to see that which they are bypassing, most of the time unconsciously, is an accelerator of practice, because then all of a sudden you're given the material to have that freedom from suffering. But those shadowy parts of ourselves, those things that we bypass, at some level, at first we can notice them, but at some level it feels like they are subconscious. And genuinely, the reflection of another being who has been and seen you in all the stages can be exactly what you need to understand where your practice is getting stuck. So I'm a huge fan of people connecting with others and actually sharing what they're experiencing in practice, not being afraid to share if it's, if they feel that it's nothing or if they feel that it's the most horrible thing, reaching out to people, because others can give that mirror that is needed to actually overcome, I don't want to call it overcome, but just be with what is going on with you.
That's great. And, the thing with the Buddha sort of doing it alone, I think that I've had people bring that up before. And the thing that I've had to say to myself and say to them is that the Buddha had a ton of incredible amounts of early childhood support. Yeah. Like he was lavished by care, which is embodied. That is the idea that he's doing it alone. Like he had so much stability, right, that he could go and just completely dive into a solo exploration, and really find, tear these layers off, which, there's almost no history of people having long-term, deep contemplative transformational experiences outside of a community. And the idea of the sort of isolated monastic that's going to, fix themselves is just, from my experience, is a sort of the Western cowboyification of this path.
Yeah. I know certain individuals, one who's a very, very dear friend of mine who is that very hermit type of energy. It's this feeling within them that in order to discover their deepest truth, they need to be alone for a very, very long time in a remote part of the world and not have contact with humanity, basically. I understand the draw for that. I understand, as somebody who loves hanging out for 3 months on a retreat and not speaking to anyone, there's some yumminess in being with yourself, even if what comes up is the horrible stuff that you've not wanted to pay attention to. There's yumminess in that. And with this certain individual, very, very insightful, very enlightened. And because they spend so much time isolated, you can tell that they're kind of operating on a feedback loop of themselves. without that mirror, without that other anchor point. We can kind of just anchor around something that may or may not be actually as skillful as we're telling ourselves.
Yeah. So I had one more question, which we talked about a little bit before we started broadcasting. A few streams now, I've talked in detail about my recent, guided work that was guided by people who, in my case, specifically doctors, guiding psychedelic therapy. And we've talked about that. You have some background in the guided psychedelic sort of arena. And so I wanted to just open that up a little bit. If you wanted to share anything about your experience along that path. I don't know what level of detail you want to talk about, so I won't talk about specific medicines or anything, but
How much time do we have?
Exactly. Well, let's take the medicine now, and 16 hours from now we'll finish out. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, please, I'd love to hear a little bit about that, your experience.
Are you more curious? I only have kind of two experiences, as you know, one with ayahuasca and the other with MDMA. Which one are you more curious?
Well, what I'm most curious about is not, in a way, it's like the non-psychedelic side of this, or the non-recreational side of this. I personally have done plenty of recreational substances, and it's fun. It's fun, and so is running around and making silly noises, or like going to a party. It's fun. And when I found out the level of transformational potential that these medicines had beyond recreation, it's like the scale is like incredibly skewed of how powerful they can be with guidance, with support in a context that is based on growth and transformation, versus one which is based on, I just want to let's just take this and walk around the woods and see what happens, which is a lot of my childhood. So that's my personal interest. So what's been impactful, what has effectively what's been there to improve and impact your life?
It's interesting. I actually, as you were saying that, I don't have a reference point of fun for those medicines, because I don't find ayahuasca to be very fun.
Sure.
Or my MDMA experience was it was intense. It's not something that I would really want to do very regularly. There was a lot there. Of course, weed is fun. Maybe that's my connection with that one.
Weed became very, very, very unfun for me. That was the end of my, using whatever 16 or so years ago was pot, where it was just not fun. I won't go into detail, but it was no longer fun. The party was over.
Yeah, I think, well, so here's the revelation of why I keep saying, don't follow the sirens call. And because for me, a lot, especially ayahuasca work, it's so intense that there's a sirens call to that intensity. I feel, however, with plant medicine, there is something that happens in the system that one can actually metabolize that intensity in a way that actually, for my own process at this point, I'm just talking about my process, it feels like that is exactly what is needed in order to integrate these things that I'm starting to understand about myself, but haven't really fully formed into embodied understanding about myself. Plant medicine, I feel, connects me with that and allows me to actually somatically integrate that feeling into me. A lot of people that have known me over the past few years, where I've been doing a lot of plant medicine, have very much commented that I feel different. And that feeling of difference is what I attribute to the understandings that I come to in ceremony. So for me, ceremony is it's usually 4 or 5 hours of just buckling down and resisting, of working with the small ego, the shadows, all that come up, and having to directly confront that, not having any way out. You're there, you're locked down, you've got that bucket in front of you, and you're going to work through what's coming up for you is exactly the level of challenge and difficulty this system needs in order to work with that which is resisting itself. And it's intense work, because the self resisting itself is just like it feels like those superhero comics like back in the day where it's like Superman meets the villain from the other universe that actually is Superman, but in that universe it's a dark one. So they fight and it's like Superman sees the move of dark Superman and dark Superman, and they're fighting, but they're never actually meeting because they preempt each other's actions. That's what that work feels like.
Yeah, there's this there's this goofy, psychedelic song about this person who's like they're ice skating and they see someone below them ice skating and they realize like, who is this person? And so they go to look at them and they're like, what are you staring at me for? And they start fighting and they're blocking every one of their own punches, and then they finally like skulk off the ice and they're like in the mud on the edge of the ice, like waiting for the next time this person comes out and they can have another fight. And I'm curious because we've talked a little bit about the multiple self model and these different selves, and we've talked on this stream before about how the dark night material in the process of meditation, in the path of meditation, is often, or my theory is that there's a self that's searching for safety and a self that's has contact with freedom, is trying to move in that direction, and there's a tension between the two. So I'm wondering if any of that rhymes with your experience. If not, that's not relevant, but I'd be curious about your perspective.
Yeah, definitely. My dark and nightish experience of spending a few weeks in bed with the realization that everything is see, hear, feel. It really did feel like I could feel the small shards of the ego, like just deeply embedded in. And that was what was causing the suffering flavor as I was just witnessing the world spontaneously come and go in its own way. But because of those shards, that's what it felt like. It was so much not good doing that, feeling about it. And, it's interesting because it feels very egoless, but you notice that the part that's making the comment is the ego. So it's still obviously there. And yet, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I appreciate what you said also about the sort of drive to move into it, because the last journey that I had was emotionally just incredibly intense. We talked about this a little bit, but it was just actually, I think we talked like hours after. It's like within fewer than 24 hours, I was still sort of in the space. And there is this sense that I need to get back to that. I need to, basically I found a pool of sadness that I was, I actually was aware of, but whatever, it came to the surface in a way that seemed new and surprising. And for 5 hours, it was just diving into this like unbelievable, seemingly endless, existential sadness. What is great is I now have a vague sense of it actually being reduced, which in order for it to be reduced, there has to be some volume that it is. It can't be infinite, right? So it's actually like, there is a little bit less of it. So it feels like, there is a possibility of being on the other side. So there's a lot of impulse right now for me to just be like, I just need to feel that experience. I just need to get back into that. And I think you're suggesting a different tact.
Yeah. That reminds me of, I think it was last year only. So, this is relatively new learning that I've had. I was going through about like 2, maybe 3 months where every single weekend I was going on an ayahuasca ceremony.
Wow.
And it wasn't just one day, it was, 2 or 3 day type of events. And it really was this drive of just, there's something there. I'm finding more and more and more. And then I got to the point where no more new insights were coming to me. And I kept going and having these epic struggles with the small ego that really wanted to obliterate itself. And it could not get anywhere. And then all of a sudden it was just this realization that plant medicine, psychedelics, they point out things, but they don't do the work for you. You still have to do that work. And that's what I was trying to get plant medicine to do my work. It's like, you found my solution. Please get me there too.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate that. And that's, there's this conversation with our the guide that I'm working with around what's the role of meditation. And there's generally this sense that it helps guide people towards the material. It helps people sort of get comfortable with potential, some ego destruction or ego deflation, just the sense that there are alternate perceptual models. And afterwards, it's a lot of the aftercare. It's a lot of the integration and how we bring this practice into our lives. But I really appreciate that the medicine can't do the work for us. It reminds me of those machines that people invented to exercise you for you. You just like held onto this thing and it moved your body. And it's like, it doesn't work.
There's a side of me that's just like, ooh, where do I get that one?
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, we have a question here in the chat here from Nick. I'll try to read this clearly if possible. Nick says, a bit confused with pain and suffering aspects. And so Nick goes through and describes what Nick is. Nick describes what Nick describes. So the body will naturally treat pain as an attack on itself. Very useful to alert you to a problem, but not if it's chronic or not treatable. It wouldn't be a good idea to teach the body to like pain if you could. I was under the impression that by not resisting pain mentally, suffering could go to zero. Sounds more like your experience. You'll still experience suffering along with the pain, but have ample capacity to embrace it. Is that clear? Nick had to jump off. Nick just said had to jump off the stream, but I'll watch. I think Nick's going to watch it in replay. Great inspiration for us all. Thank you so much. Happy to have you back. Hopefully you come back, and we'll be watching the replay for this answer. So Nick, welcome to the replay. If anyone wants to know, by the way, all of our live streams are available at this address. I'll just type this in the chat now, and Aishin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Nick was saying.
I really, really appreciate what he was saying, and that suffering, yes, is mental, and it's also physical, it's also emotional, and there's many, many, many layers to all these different realms of suffering, and primarily resistance. I love Shinzan's suffering is pain times resistance, and checking into where we resist, how we resist. The first layer is a very cognitive level of resistance, and people sometimes can feel somatically that bracing against pain as a resistance. Yes, dropping thoughts about the pain does decrease the pain, because this is a me thing. I'm very somatically a wired person, so just dropping mental resistance isn't enough. My body will still resist the crap out of the pain. I need to actually release into the pain, and just relaxing around pain, I find, is still subconsciously I'm resisting pain because I'm telling myself, I just relax. It's going to be okay. It's going to feel good. Setting myself up for that. I never experience pain, or never experience a dramatic decrease of pain. What does help me to be able to be with my pain is actually embracing it. It is being with it at a level of sensation and not being it as an interpretation of the sensation. There's a very famous, I can't remember what Roshi said, pain is an interpretation of sensation. And I find that the only way I can be at that place with pain, staying at it well before it gets interpreted into pain, just the sensation itself, is to actually fully fall into it. And that's challenging, because what you're pointing out is the body takes it as an attack. It's a very healthy thing to experience that aversion to pain. It's what enables us to survive in the world, and all our ancestors. Let's face it, if we experienced pain as pleasure, most of us wouldn't be alive. It would be really, really hard. So I'm not saying to completely reinterpret every single moment as pain, but that chronic pain that you're talking about, the one that is always there in different variations, but is more or less there, that's the one that needs to be embraced. Not as pain, but as sensation. Not as an indication of something wrong, but just an indication of where you're at. When you can be with sensation at that level of just information coming in, pain dramatically shifts in it's your ability to hold it, to have volition, to have more capacity, but you have capacity because you've embraced it. And it's the difference in my experience of, being in a wheelchair, like having to drag myself out of bed on my hands and knees and just like collapsing into just how incredibly horrible that experience and how invalid that makes you feel when you can't even go to the bathroom by yourself. To, now going out and I go hiking for hours a day. I go camp and stuff. And it's not that I don't experience pain. It's not that hiking up mountains is not a painful experience. It's an intense sensation that I can tune into my body that lets me know where my body is at. And I can read the intensity now as this is the normal level of intensity. It's okay. No problem to, oh, this is actually getting more intense. Hiking 2 hours uphill, yeah, the body actually is feeling that one. And I'm not ignoring it. Now it's a signal, okay, rest. Maybe I need to head back. Maybe I need to take a drink of water. Maybe I need to switch your practice to something else. All of those are indications now of the level of sensation instead of, uh-oh, this is pain. I must have done something wrong. Well, this isn't good. This means the rest of my day is going to be shot. Probably the rest of my week, maybe the month. Oh yeah, sometimes there's months of times where I'm just in bed. And now I'm seeing myself living under an overpass out of a shopping cart with nobody in the world to love me. That's where that mind can go. Being able to recognize, yes, like you said, mind resistance is really, really key, but there are several ways that the mind resists, the body resists, and the heart resists. So tension, letting go, kindness, I feel is the heart one for me, especially. And then, of course, bringing awareness into the actual process of the mind, taking that thing and then judging it to be bad. And then all of a sudden, everything that unrolls from that badness. If you can stay with it as just that moment where it comes up right before it's good or bad, and recognize that good and badness of something as the mind's overlay on what's already there. And if you can just hang out at what's there without that overlay, or even just acknowledge the overlay for what it is, and just hang out that sensation, that's where I find how mindfulness really, really works with the experience of severe pain. I'm sorry, I feel like I just went blah, blah, blah. I hope that made sense.
Made a lot of sense. It's super helpful. And one question here in the chat, and I feel like I know the answer here. Someone is asking if we can share resources about pursuing psychedelic supported work. And so I can just share from my experience that it's a very interesting moment because effectively we cannot. I mean, we can maybe Aishin has a different take, but basically what I'll say is this is because of the sensitivity of the work, it is effectively universally underground at this moment. And because of that, this forum itself is public enough that we definitely, there's replays, just anyone could be watching. So we can't share any kind of resources or even sort of how to pursue those resources realistically. Typically, how it tends to work is by close associates, people that are trusted, then saying, hey, this person is trusted, I can vouch for X, Y, and Z. So it really ends up being about developing relationships with folks who have those experiences. So I'll just say that generally, but I also wouldn't say, don't pursue it, because I think it is something where if you take the time and sort of do the research over time, it does become clear on how to do those kind of things. That said, if someone were interested, I think, in doing like the kind of ayahuasca work that you're describing, that is, as far as I understand, legal in like Peru, and people will actually, there are places that are fully organized to do that kind of work, to do the kind of MDMA therapy that we were describing, is a little different. And what I would do research around is MAPS, which is MAPS therapy. And I believe that MAPS is just going to talk sort of on the edges of things. I don't think they're going to direct you towards any particular therapist. I believe you may have to have a diagnosis of PTSD to be able to do that work. And some people may or may not be able to have that availability. So, but it's worth pursuing over time, even if it's a slow process. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Aishin?
I think you pretty much covered it. If you are at a place where you really don't know anyone that might know someone, as Janusz said, MDMA now is being researched for PTSD, and there are therapists around the country that are actively using it to treat PTSD. If you feel that that would be a benefit for you, I would definitely encourage to seek that out, especially because the psychologists that are using it have been trained. There's a lot of training programs out there specifically in the MAPS protocol and being able to work with you. And of course, if you have a relationship with a psychologist, they can do that reflective thing that I was talking about that Sangha members can do. A psychologist can be your Sangha in that case and give you what you need in terms of reflection and being able to guide you through those things.
Yeah, I would highly recommend whichever direction you go. Right now, the best trained people to do this would be MAPS trained folks. So I'll leave that there. But also, more importantly, Aishin, how do people find you? How do people get in touch with you? If they want to know more, if they want to see what you're creating, how do we find you?
Yeah, I do have a website out there. It's basically a fancy business card. It's stressreliefmindfulness.com.
Okay. Put that in the chat.
Yeah, and you can actually directly contact me. I think there's like a contact button that sends me an email, or schedule buttons as well to schedule things if you would like to work with me. That's the best way. It's not a great website. I apologize. It is just like a glorified business card, but it's kind of pretty. So that's it.
Listen, I put that in the chat. Listen, that's all we need. I mean, honestly, it's all we need is a glorified business card, a phone number, an email address. What more do we need? Okay, awesome. Aishin, it was so great to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this. Now, a little tradition that we do here, we end the stream with a wish. We make a wish for everyone here who's listening, everyone who's watching the playback, and then we have some nice background music that'll play. So if you'd like to guide that would be great. It's a little bit of a sort of present moment, taking in what we're experiencing and carrying over the sort of what we're having contact with before. So you can do that, or I can do it, but I would love to hear if you want to take us out.
I don't know if I have a wish, but I would like to actually do a formal forgiveness asking, because I know that I was talking about a lot of really intense things, and something that I might have said may have really not hit right inside you. Your truth may have definitely said, my truth is not your truth. And there might have been some harm done. So I want to just ask for forgiveness if intentionally or unintentionally I caused harm in sharing anything that I did. So please ask for your forgiveness. And for anything that you may be doing right now or in the future, I give forgiveness for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So then I do have a wish for everyone here. My wish for you is simple, just in this particular moment right here, right now, that you're able to, as Aishin was talking about, to connect with that acceptance of what your current experience is, the body and the mind as it's unfolding in its beautiful, natural capacity, its history and its tendencies, its momentums of thoughts and actions, just that you're able to appreciate, connect with, and even if you need to distract yourself or unplug in some skillful way, that's okay. To know that you are doing well, you're doing great, to reach out for support, connection from those around you, and to know that we're here with you on this journey and you're not here doing it alone. Awesome. Thank you so much, as always. I'm Vale says, I wish more people were here on this stream. Well, the most important person here is you. I'm Vale. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you so much thank you so much, Aishin, for being here. And as always, it's lovely to see everyone. Thank you so much. We'll be back here in this very same place in fewer than 48 hours, Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Look forward to seeing everyone soon. Thank you again so much for joining us. We'll see you all very soon. Bye.